Rise and shine!
It's espresso time!
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and successful people don't wake up and go, wow, it's another day, I'm so happy. The difference is they have a morning routine that sets them up for success, like watching one of these videos. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee and get ready for a shot of espresso from Warren Buffett.
I wake up every morning.
Espresso keep me going.
I wake up every morning.
There's a company here in Washington called Geico, and I first got exposed to that in 1950. I was 20 years, I was 19 years, well, it was 51, I'm sorry. I was 20 years old, and I came down here, and I came down on a Saturday because I'd learned that my professor who I worshiped at Columbia named Ben Graham was the chairman. I got down here and the door was locked. When I went to the building, because it was Saturday, and I pounded on the door, and some janitor let me in, and a marvelous fellow named Lorimer Davidson spent 4 hours with me teaching me all about insurance, and he helped me so much in life. You're going to get help by some wonderful people in life. It's a great thing to remember later on when you get to be my age, that all the help you've received from different people, because nobody does it alone. Obama got in trouble when he said that in the campaign, that nobody does it by themselves. Nobody does do it by themselves. We all sit in the shade of trees that were planted by others. So it's obligatory, I think, to plant a few trees ourselves if we've had good luck. It's been a great ride, but it's not over.
Asking for help is hard. We are afraid of rejection. We're afraid people will say no. And we're afraid of judgment as to not having it all figured out and not being the perfect people that we pretend to be on Instagram and social media. But asking for help could be the single biggest unlock in your life right now, because you don't have all the answers, and because you're struggling to figure out what your next move should be, and other people have figured it out. Other people have the answer that you're struggling with right now. And you either don't know the person to ask, or you do, but you're too afraid. But unlocking that question mark in your head will come by asking for help. I struggle with it. I'm terrified of disappointing people. It's my number one fear. And I think it's partly the ego of like, hey, I don't need help. I'm doing this thing. I'm figuring it out by myself. Let's go. I can solve any problem. And I think that's what we need to train ourselves to do, in part as an entrepreneur, to just default to, I will figure this out. I can come up with a solution. But we take that to the extreme of, I need to figure everything out always by myself. And so that's what makes a successful solo entrepreneur, but it doesn't make a successful business builder. That's how you stay stuck as a solo person. It can provide a full-time income, it can get you out of your job, it's great, but it doesn't let you have a giant impact because you're stuck doing everything yourself. Giving up the control, giving up the willingness to be judged. It's painful. They may say no, or they may judge you, and that might be devastating. But until you're actually going off and asking people, you're never going to get the answer you need to actually go build a business that you want. I just came back from speaking at an event that was called Transform You. It was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the host, the entrepreneur who put it on, his name is Stephen Scoggins. And I really admire this guy because he, as soon as the event was done, emailed me and he said, Evan, thank you so much for being a part of my event. It was amazing. And he shared some of the stats of lives saved and divorce saved and all that stuff. But then he asked, well, how do I get there faster? How do I become a more well-known speaker, entrepreneur, the thought leadership game? How do I get there faster? And looking at Stephen, he's built a super successful construction company, and now is transitioning towards thought leadership, and has spent, maybe 6 months, a year, really going hard at it. And he humbled himself to ask for help. And so the past 3 days, we've been going back and forth with different ideas of rebranding, of programs, initiatives, and involving people on my team, his team, just trying to help him figure out what the next 12 months should look like for him. And I'm happy to do it. Yesterday, we did an Instagram Live together. I had something else scheduled, and that person canceled last minute. And so with 30 minutes before showtime, I could have just gone live by myself, which I've done tons of times, but I was thinking about Steven on my mind. So I messaged him and said, hey, Steven, are you free in 30 minutes to go live with me on Instagram to brainstorm in front of all the people who are gonna watch, to brainstorm your challenge right now? You know, let's spend some time together doing this, and hopefully in you sharing what you're up to and your mindset and your vulnerability, other people can learn and be inspired as well. And he said yes. And this was, 2 days after his event. His throat's burned. He can barely talk. This is supposed to be his week off. He didn't have anything else booked, so he was on his home. It's supposed to be his downtime. And I wouldn't have been offended if he said no, but he said yes. And then normally I spend 25 minutes with people on Instagram Live. We went for an hour brainstorming the next version of where he could take his business. Most people would have been way too afraid to do that. Most people who are in a position like Steven is, who's had a lot of success in a different field, to then humble themselves to ask for help and to do it publicly, I really admire that. I hope that I have the courage to do that too. It's inspiring. I struggle asking for help. I worry for the same two reasons. I worry that people will judge me for not having the answers, and I worry that they'll say no. Especially in the things that are around the area that I'm supposed to be good at. I just launched my Discord server, and it's amazing. We're having such great conversations. If you want to join for free, it's evancarmichael.biz. Come say hi. And I know nothing about Discord, and I don't pretend to know anything about Discord. So I'm asking all the noob questions and getting a lot of help. And it's amazing to learn and be a part of it. So if there's something brand new or something totally outside your zone, then it's easier to ask for help. But when it's kind of close to what you're doing, this is where I think most of us struggle. If it's close to what you're doing, if you have your business set up, you've been doing it. You've been doing it for a year. You've been doing it for 2 years. You've been doing it for 6 months. You've been doing it. And you've been trying to put out this message of what you're doing, right? That you can help solve people's problems, whether it's a product, service, book, speech, whatever. And then to not have it work. That was my first business. It was a good product. It just wasn't working. I should have asked for more help in my first business upon reflection. I didn't, because we didn't want to look like we didn't know what we were doing, because we had a good product, but something was wrong. Something was wrong. We weren't hitting the market well. We weren't getting adoption we weren't getting customers. It just wasn't working. And so we were too afraid to ask for help. When it's close to you, you're too afraid because you've caught so much rejection in your business, you can't bear more rejection of the idea or the concept. We're so afraid of that extra judgment that then we'd rather not ask for help and struggle in silence. And I think that's what leads to you not hitting your goals. That's what leads to you staying stuck. That's what leads to you staying small. That leads to you staying isolated. It leads to you staying isolated and alone because you're not willing to get out there and ask for help. Somebody's got an answer to your question. Whatever you're struggling with right now, somebody has solved it. And maybe you know the person and you can ask them for help, or maybe you don't, but you can ask people for the person who might be able to help. You can ask somebody. It's just the courage to do it. And recognize that if the person says no, it doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean that the idea you've got is terrible. It doesn't mean that you should quit or give up. If anything, it means you need to ask somebody else. Because you don't need to stay stuck. You don't need to stay small, and you definitely don't need to do this all alone. You just have to have the courage to ask for help. Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're gonna enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and just get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through on your goals. That is not good enough, Belief Nation. But when you create a specific plan of action for what you're going to do next and commit to other people, like leaving it in the comments below, that number jumps to 95% chance of you following through. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action. Put it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you. Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for you to shift that habit forward. So I've designed a special free program to help you get more self-belief for every day. For 254 days, I will send you an email to an unlisted video that, if you watch it, will shift your confidence forward. The links to join for free are in the description below.
If I ever write a book, it's going to be called Why Smart People Do Dumb Things. My partner says it should be autobiographical. If you ask me to write a story on what is Potomac Electric Power worth or something like that, I can write the story, and that's what I'm doing every day. I'm assigning myself a story, and then I go out and... So if I give them a whole bunch of money, and they love the money, and they don't love the business, no matter what they tell me, 6 months from now, they'll be gone. Stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks, at one time or another, sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else, because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that, and when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names. I have an old-fashioned belief that I only should expect to make money in things that I understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand, what the product does or anything like that. I mean understand what the economics of the business are likely to look like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I know, in general, what the economics of, say, Wrigley chewing gum will look like 10 years from now. The internet isn't going to change the way people chew gum. It isn't going to change which gum they chew. If you own the chewing gum market in a big way, and you've got Double Mint and Spearmint and Juicy Fruit, those brands will be there 10 years from now. So I can't pinpoint exactly what the numbers are going to look like on Wrigley, but I'm not going to be way off if I try to look forward on something like that. Evaluating that company is within what I call my circle of competence. I understand what they do, I understand the economics of it, I understand the competitive aspects of the business. So figuring out the economic consequences, TV. I think there's, 20, 25 million sets a year sold in the United States. I don't think there's one of them made in the United States anymore. You'd say TV set manufacturer, what a wonderful business. Everybody, nobody had a TV in 1950, or thereabouts, 45 to 50. Everybody has multiple sets now. Nobody in the United States has made any real money making the sets. They're all out of business. The Magnavoxes, the RCAs, all of those companies. Radio was the equivalent in the 20s. Over 500 companies making radios in the 1920s. Again, I don't think there's a U.S. radio manufacturer at the present time. But Coca-Cola, what was it, 1884 at Jacobs Pharmacy or whatever, the fellow comes up with something. A lot of copiers over the years. But now you've got a company that is selling roughly 1.1 billion 8-ounce servings of its product, not all Coke, Sprite, and some others, daily throughout the world 117 years later. So understanding the economic characteristics of a business is different than predicting the fact that an industry is going to do wonderfully. And so when I look at the internet businesses, or I look at tech businesses, I say this is a marvelous thing, and I love to play around on the computer, and I order my books from Amazon and all kinds of things, but I don't know who's going to win. And unless I know who's going to win, I'm not interested in investing. I'll just play around on the computer. And defining your circle of competence is the most important aspect of investing. It's not how important, how large your circle is. You don't have to be an expert on everything. But knowing where the perimeter of that circle of what you know and what you don't know is, and staying inside of it, is all important. Tom Watson Sr., who started IBM, said in his book, he said, "I'm no genius," he said, "but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots." And that is the key. So if I understand a few things, and I stick in that arena, I'll do okay. And if I don't understand something, but I get all excited about it because my neighbors are talking about it, and the stocks are going up and everything, I start fooling around someplace else, eventually I'll get creamed, and I should.
Speaking of resources, let's talk a little bit about your decision to put your money with Bill and Melinda Gates. You are somebody, obviously, who's, arguably, not even arguably, definitively by numbers, the best in the world in terms of figuring out how to allocate capital. I mean, dollars don't lie, and then put it to work. And yet with philanthropy, you basically outsourced it. How did that happen?
Well, that's true, but when my wife had a baby, I didn't deliver it either. I mean, I didn't fill my kids' teeth. I mean, Adam Smith in 1776 explained specialization of labor. He did a pretty good job of it, and I feel I'm very good at piling up money, and my wife was very good at unpiling it. I mean, it's a very simple formula, and she was going to handle the philanthropy big time, and she did during her lifetime at a moderate level. But basically, I was going to turn it all over to her to handle, and I would pile up during my lifetime. And she died earlier, and therefore I had to make a decision as to what was the best way to use a very large sum of money and get my goals achieved through other people. And there are other people that are better than I am at all kinds of things. I mean, A-Rod's here. I mean, we're not going to get into a home run derby. So I believe in. I really do believe in getting people that are younger, more energetic, but also experienced, and in the case of Bill and Melinda, have their own money up as well, and they've got identical objectives really with me. Well, in 1973, the Washington Post company had gone public in 1971, right about the Pentagon Papers time. But in 73, the Nixon administration was, through B.B. Rebozo, who was a pal of Nixon's, they were challenging the licenses of two of the Florida television stations the Post owned. So the stock went from 37 down to 16. Now at 16, there were about 5 million shares outstanding. So the whole Washington Post company was selling for $80 million. And that included the newspaper, 4 big TV stations, Newsweek, and some other assets, and no debt to speak of. So the Washington Post company, which was intrinsically worth $400 or $500 million, was selling for about 80 million in the market. We bought most of our stock at about the equivalent of 100 million in the market, and it was ridiculous. I mean, you had a business that unquestionably was worth 4 or 5 times what it was selling for, and Nixon wasn't going to put them out of business.
When you're doing these analyses then and now, do you have computers that help you, or how did you actually read all? Did you just get printed materials, or how did you in those days get the materials to read about the Washington Post? Or how do you do it today?
Well, pretty much the same way, except there's fewer opportunities now. But I met Bob Woodward back, and he'd just come out with all the president's men, and all of a sudden, below 30 years of age, he was getting quite wealthy, and we had breakfast or lunch over at the Madison Hotel. And he said, "What do I do with this money?" And I said, investing is just about assigning yourself the right story. I said, imagine Ben Bradley this morning said to you, what is the Washington Post company worth? What would you do? You have to write the story in a month. You'd go out and interview TV brokers and newspaper brokers and owners, and you'd try and value each asset. I said, that's what I do. I assign myself the right story. And it's nothing more than that. Now, there's some stories I can't write. If you ask me to write a story on, what is some glamorous but non-profit making business worth, I don't know how to write that story. But if you ask me to write a story on what is Potomac Electric Power worth or something like that. I can write the story, and that's what I'm doing every day. I'm assigning myself a story, and then I go out and...
How do you deal with failure? And what's your advice to young entrepreneurs like me, in this case, especially with regards to failure and how to approach it?
Yeah, well, if you fail, you really do dust yourself off and get right back in. I mean, you're going to fail at some things. You're going to have some human relationships that don't work out. Fairly significant number of people get divorced. I mean, that's a very big decision to have turn out badly. But I think if you study almost everybody and read Kay's book, Personal History, and everybody fails at some things. I mean, particularly when you're younger. I mean, you do have less experience in evaluating humans and just knowing about whatever it may be businesses. But it is not fatal. I mean, if you're healthy and you live in this, particularly living in this country, there's going to be an opportunity that comes along. I got turned down for the Harvard Business School when I got out of the University of Nebraska. And I remember, I went to Chicago to get interviewed. This is when you traveled on the train, and so I spent 10 hours going there. And this fellow looked at me, and about 10 minutes, he said, forget it, Bell. And now I got to go back on the train 10 hours and think, what am I going to tell my dad? What am I going to tell my dad? I mean, my dad always told me I could do anything, and everything. Now I've just gotten turned down, But it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because then I went to Columbia, where Ben Graham was. In fact, it probably even affected who I married, because I took a one-year course at Columbia instead of 2 years at Harvard, and she might have found some other guy during that time. And almost everything in my life that looked like a failure has either usually it's turned into a success. I mean, the world isn't over. If you have bad luck in health, that's tough. I mean, there's just no getting away. I've been lucky on that. But the other kind of things, if you're healthy and you're bright and you've got decades ahead of you, if something goes wrong, if you find yourself working for the wrong employer and they're doing things you don't approve of, or they're not treating you fairly, the world isn't over yet. You just go out and find somebody else. When you get to my age, you will not measure how well you've done by how much money you've got. I can guarantee you that. You'll all do fine on money anyway. I mean, think about it. 7 hours a day, you're in a bed. You got exactly the same mattress I've got. If you don't, we'll sell it to you at the Furniture Mart. We're on a parity. I can't outdo you, in terms of my sleeping enjoyment. You can match it by buying this mattress, which we'll give you a special price on. Just mention my name. We eat at the same places, We eat at Dairy Queen, particularly if you're in my position because we own it. But we eat at McDonald's and Burger King, and when I leave here, I'll stop by a fast food place on the way. So our eating experiences are the same. We travel the same. I mean, I had a 10-year-old car up till about a year ago, and it just doesn't make any difference to me. They all work. We live in a place that's warm in the winter and it's cool in the summer, and we watch the Super Bowl on big screen TV. You do it, I do it. We dress more or less the same. I mean, I pay more for my clothes, but they look cheap when I put them on. So we're really on a parity. Yeah. So the money isn't going to be that big a deal. Everybody in this country is going to, with the intelligence this group has and the energy you have, you're going to do well. So what's the difference? What really counts? Well, I would say that you will measure, health is enormously important, and that's a matter of a fair amount of luck. I mean, so I'm not shortchanging it. I'm just saying you can't do too much about that. But you will measure your success in life by how many, and extent, whether it's the people you want at 70 or whatever the age may be. You'll measure it by how many of them really love you, in the end. I mean, you can't buy love. I mean, it doesn't work. You can buy sex, you can buy testimonial dinners, you can buy your name on buildings, you can do all kinds of things. But the only way you get to be, love is to be lovable. It's kind of irritating, actually. If you got a lot of money, it'd be more fun to just write out a check for $1 million. So everybody, from now on loves me. But it doesn't work that way. And in fact, the only way is to be lovable. And I've got this friend who came out of Auschwitz and had at least one member of the family die there. And what is it now? It's 60 years later. She still, when she looks at people, it's a Polish Jew, when she looks at people, the question she asks herself in determining who she really trusts as friends, the one question in her mind is, would they hide me? Now, when you get to be 70, if you've got a lot of people that would hide you, you've had a successful life. I know people who have a tremendous amount of money, no one would hide. Their own kids wouldn't hide them. I mean, they really wouldn't. I mean, their business associates wouldn't, or anybody else. If it really came down to it, you know, they don't have anybody's respect. They've got their attention maybe with money or something of the sort, but nobody loves them. And my friend Tom Murphy at Cap Cities TV, I mean, dozens of people would hide Murph, you know. All kinds of people would hide my wife, you know. Ben Graham, a lot of people would hide. My dad would have had a number. And then, like I say, I can tell you people that, you know, everybody may pay homage to him, and the kids may put up with them and hope they don't change their will or something, but the truth is that nobody would hide them. And if you've got a lot of people that would hide you when you get to be 70, you will have had a very successful life. How do you turn failure into a plus? And it's true, when I was at the University of Nebraska, one day I was reading the Daily Nebraskan, and it said in room 300 or something, at 3 o'clock, there will be this panel of 3 professors here at the university, and they're going to award the Nathan Gold Scholarship. I don't know whether you still have that around? And at the time, it said it would give you $500 to go to the graduate school of your choice. I don't know whether it's changed in amount, but that was it. So I read this, and I went there to this room at 3 o'clock that day, or whatever it was, and I walked in the room, and there were the professors, and I was the only student that showed up. I mean, it really got to them. I mean, they were stuck. They kept waiting and looking at their watch and hoping there'd be more candidates, but no one came in. So I won $500 by default. And those are usually my biggest triumphs when nobody else shows up. And so here I was. I had $500 to go toward it wasn't limited, any graduate school for a master's degree. So I applied to Harvard. My dad wanted me to. And I shortly heard from Harvard, and they said, go to Chicago and meet this fellow who interviews applicants from the Midwest. So I got on the train, and that's what you did in those days, and I spent 10 hours on the Burlington going to Chicago. Then I transferred to another little interurban train to go up to this country day school where this fellow was the headmaster, and he was the big interviewer for Harvard. And I got there, and after about 10 minutes, he said, better think about something else. He come back later on. I was 19 at the time, and I looked about 12, and I acted about 8. So it was not a great combination, So he said, forget it. So I took the little interurban train back to Chicago, and I took the 10-hour train back to Omaha, and all the time I'm thinking, what do I tell my parents? It's kind of embarrassing. But it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because if I'd gone to Harvard, I would have gone to a 2-year business school. I instead applied to Columbia, where I could graduate in 1 year and get a master's degree. Luckily, that by the accident of it and being in the Nebraska National Guard, which did not get called up for the Korean War, I missed going in the Korean War. I got to meet Ben Graham, which had an enormous effect on me subsequently. And I probably got my wife that way because she was going to Northwestern, and I was able to put on sort of a full court press because I got out in 1 year, and otherwise she'd have met some other guy. I mean, I got her before the competition showed up, and so it worked out wonderfully. It couldn't have worked out better, and that's been my life basically. I mean, things, you will get some disappointments, but the future is what counts. If I knew every decision I was going to make was going to be perfect, it would not be as much fun. It'd be like playing golf and knowing you're going to hit a hole-in-one on every hole. You wouldn't play golf if every time you got on a tee, you just took a swing and the ball ended up in the hole. It'd be fun for a few days, you get on TV, but the game would not be any fun. So it's failure, and I wouldn't even consider them failures, but they're mistakes or whatever you want to call it. They're part of the game, And in the end, you know, you go on, and we've made plenty of mistakes in business. We'll make plenty more. And the Babe Ruth, and for a long time, it subsequently got eclipsed by a few fellows, but he held the record for strikeouts. He also held the record for home runs and was the highest paid baseball player until the modern era came along. So it's part of the game. If you take big swings, you're going to miss sometimes.
What are the best ways for youth to get started now in securing their financial future?
For what to secure their financial future?
For youth.
Youth? Oh, well, it's not very complicated. It goes back to getting full use out of your own talents first. I mean, the difference between whether you're going to be earning X or 2X or 3X a year 20 years from now is going to be a function of how well, not how much talent you have, but how well you use the talents you already have. And so that is your best financial future is your own ability and your a capacity to use those abilities to their potential. And that can't be taken away from you. They can't even tax it. I mean, most things. If you own a piece of real estate, if they double the taxes, they double the taxes, and that changes your ownership in the property, because now, in effect, the taxing authorities own more of it because they've got a greater command on the revenue stream. The same thing about almost any asset you have, but they don't tax what's in your head, and they don't tax your ability to start performing when you get to work in the morning and finish in the evening to your potential. One of the things that amazes me is how people who really do perform well just sort of jump out at you once you're running a business. When I got out of school, I thought, everybody would behave that way, but they don't. Most people sort of go through life in a sleepwalk, and if you don't, you will stand out. So the biggest thing for your financial future is yourself.
You both have several managers working under you, so I was wondering what are some steps that a new entrant into the job market can take to accelerate their journey towards an upper-level management position?
Yeah, well, one thing I will tell you that I didn't realize when I was getting out of school is how much the unusual person will jump out at you. I mean, and it isn't because they got 200 IQs or anything like that. It's really because of just how they behave, what they bring, the energy they bring, the commitment they bring, the quality of how they do things, how they treat the people around them, all kinds of things. But you will jump out much more than you might anticipate. One of the things you would want to be sure to do is, whether you like it or not, get very comfortable, it may take a while, with public speaking, for example. I mean, that's an asset that will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a liability if you don't like doing it and are uncomfortable doing it. That also will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a necessary skill. But a lot of the skills are just human skills. If you get the best out of people around you, that's a rare talent, and it doesn't correlate with IQ. It correlates with an attitude and toward the world and toward other people. And it's a talent that if you work at early and you're really conscious about it, you don't have to show up other people. You don't have to be smarter than they are or anything else. You want to bring out the best in them. It will pay huge dividends. Well, I was lucky that I got started early. I mean, it always helps if you get started early. And my dad happened to be in the investment business, so I would go down to his office on Saturdays. And so at age probably 7 or something, I started reading these books that were around the place. And so I had a 15-year jump on many people in a sense, and that helped a lot. And I was always fascinated by it. I knew what I wanted to do early, and I think that's a huge advantage too. And then you don't need a lot of brains in this business. I mean, I've always said if you got an IQ of 160, give away 30 points to somebody else, because you don't need it in investments. What you do need is emotional stability. You have to be able to think independently, and you have to be. When you come to a conclusion, you have to really not care what other people say, and just follow the facts and follow your reasoning, and that's tough for a lot of people. That part I think I was just lucky with. I was born that way.
In terms of emotions, it's a truism that in investing, emotions are your enemy.
Absolutely.
That when the market's good, if you feel good, don't. If you feel bad, you should probably do it.
Right.
But how did you? What was that extra thing where so many will acknowledge that, and yet we saw in the current crisis they panicked while you went into seemingly potential disasters like GE and Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. I can't really tell you the answer. I mean, I didn't learn in school or anything. It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. You know, and Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability.
All of you in this room have the brains to do extremely well in life. You've all got the energy to do extremely well in life. And then the question is, how do you apply it? If you've got a 200 horsepower motor, do you get 200 horsepower out of it? Do you get your full potential, or do you get 100 horsepower or 50 horsepower? Now, there's two things that can hold you back in getting the full horsepower out of your engine, whatever it may be. All of you have big enough engines. And one of those is a lack of education, but that probably isn't going to happen to very many people in this room. If you did have a lack of education, if you didn't have a chance to get a decent education in life, it wouldn't make any difference what that potential was, because you'd never unlock it. But the second most important thing, and equally as important, is in terms of the habits that you develop, in terms of what you do with yourself. When we hire people, we look for three qualities. We look for integrity, we look for intelligence, and we look for energy. But if they don't have the first one, integrity, the other two will kill you. Because if you're hiring somebody without integrity, you really want them to be dumb and lazy, don't you? I mean, last thing in the world you want for them is to be smart and energetic. So smart and energetic only goes with integrity. But the nice thing about you make your own decision on that. You can't change your IQ or how far you can throw a football or how high you can jump or the color of your hair very easily. But you can elect to have integrity that matches anybody else's. And if you match that with intelligence, which you have, and energy, which you have, you will get an extraordinary result, and you'd be very foolish to sell me 10% of yourself for $50,000. On the other hand, if you don't match it with that, your potential will, in a significant part, go unused.
And I was wondering, how do you decide what you invest your time and money in?
Yeah, well, I like to find businesses that have good economics. Now, what are good economics? Well, good economics are a business that has some kind of a moat around it that makes its product or its service or its location or something a little more desirable to the customer than any other sort of comparable product. The number one candy bar in the last 30 or 40 years has been Snickers. People don't fool around with different candy bars. They fool around with different length dresses, they fool around, with all kinds of things, but they don't fool around with candy bars because they figure, they're going to go in and lay out 50 cents or whatever it is and put it in their mouth. And they're not going to, for 50 cents and putting it in your mouth, I mean, you're not going to say, I'll lay out 45 cents and put something else in my mouth. So you find that very stable. And we like businesses that we think we can figure out where they're going to be in 10 or 15 years. I don't know where the information technology businesses are going to be in 10 or 15 years. I know where Snickers bars are going to be in 10 or 15 years. They're going to be selling just about the way they do now. I know where Wrigley's gum is going to be in 10 or 15 years. There's not going to be a lot of innovation in chewing gum. The internet's not going to cause people to quit chewing gum either. I mean, at least, Gates may think so, but I don't think so. But it's predictability regarding the sustainability of a competitive advantage, something special about a product.
If you buy a business, if you buy a farm, you go up and look, every couple of weeks to see how far the corn is up, and do you worry too much about whether somebody says this is going to be a year of low prices because exports are being affected or anything like that? You buy a farm. and you hold it for, I've got one farm that I bought in the 1980s, and my son runs it, but I've been there once, you know. I mean, it doesn't grow faster if I go and stare at it. You know, I can't cheer for it, you know. More effort, or something like that. And I know there's going to be some years when prices are going to be good and some when the prices aren't going to be good. I know there's years when yields will be better than others. But I bought the farm, and if it just doesn't, I don't care about economic predictions on it or anything of the sort. I do care that over the years it's well tended to in terms of rotating crops, and I hope yields get better, which they generally have. In fact, that farm 100 years ago would have probably produced 30 bushels, maybe 35 bushels of corn per acre, and now in a good year, you know, it'd be 200. I mean, we've really made progress in this country. That's one reason commodity prices, if you go back a couple hundred years, they've moved so little, is because we've just gotten better and better at whether it's cotton or whether it's corn or soybeans or all kinds of things. And you and I have benefited from that.
And so Apple's kind of like a farm.
Well, it's a long-term investment, and if you own the best auto dealership in town, the best brand, and you had somebody good running it, you wouldn't drop by every day and say, you know, how many people have come in today, or, you know, I think interest rates are going up a little, maybe that'll slow down our sales or anything. No, you buy it knowing there's 365 days a year, and you're going to own it for 20 years, so that's 7,300 days, and you know things are going to be different from day to day and year to year. You shouldn't buy it at the day-to-day stuff.
I was wondering how you define success personally.
Well, I can certainly define happiness, because that's what I am. I mean, I mean, I get to do what I like to do every single day of the year, and I get to do it with people I like. And I don't have to associate with anybody. Causes my stomach to churn. The only thing in my job I don't like, and this only happens about every 3 or 4 years, occasionally I have to fire somebody, and I don't like. That's the only thing. Other than I tap dance to work, and I get down there and I think I'm supposed to lie on my back and paint the ceiling, you know, or something like Michelangelo. I mean, that's the way I feel, and it doesn't diminish. It's tremendous fun. So. You know, if they say that success is getting what you want and happiness is wanting what you get. Well, I don't know which one applies in this case, but I do know that I wouldn't be doing anything else. I mean, I do advise you, you know, when you go out to work, go to work for an organization that you admire, people you admire, because it'll turn you on, and you ought to be happy where you are working. And I always worry about people who say, you know, I'm going to do this for 10 years. I really don't like it very well, and then I'll do 10 more years of this. I mean, that's a little like saving up sex for your old age. I mean, not a very good idea. So get right.
So you would recommend that.
Get right into what you enjoy, you know, and you'll be successful at it. You really will. I mean, you won't be able to miss. And you know, that's. I don't regard what I do as the most important thing in the world at all, but it's right for me. I mean, I happen to be wired in a certain way that what I do works in this. If I had to do what, you know, Bill does, I mean, it lasts about 10 minutes. And that's true of a lot of things, but luckily I kind of stumbled into the thing that I do best, and that, you know, that it's worked out well.
Warren is probably the most rational person I've ever met. Charlie Munger would be a close rival. And Charlie became a man that Warren depended on heavily. And I think his first experiences in the discarded cigar butt era convinced him that it was not exactly where he wanted to be.
He'd made so much money for so long doing what he'd been taught by Ben Graham, which is to buy these very cheap stocks. And if they were cheap enough, he didn't care if it was a lousy company and a lousy management. He knew he was going to make money anyway just because of the cheapness.
Charlie Munger has had a big impact on me in moving me toward looking for wonderful companies at fair prices rather than fair companies at wonderful prices. And that was enormously important because it enabled Berkshire to scale up in a way that would have been impossible to do otherwise. We were mental partners right from the moment we met.
I want to know, going back 50 years, what it was like when you first met Warren.
Well, I thought he was a prodigy. And I got a lot of criticism. My wife said, "Why are you paying such enormous respect to that young man with a crew cut who won't eat vegetables?"
He's ungodly smart. He's got a much broader intellect than I do. And he's magnificent at being able to condense important ideas into just a very few words.
If you're not interested in the economic scene right now, you're mentally dead.
Charlie has no tact.
All right, let's talk a little bit about bankers. Charlie on Friday compared them to heroin addicts.
Yeah, well, that's colorful, Charlie, but I would not have chosen that.
I once wrote of him that when they handed out humility, he didn't get his fair share.
The ideal way to run a headquarters is to have one man, preferably over 80, sitting in an office by himself. Anything else is pure frippery.
He's always honest in what he tells me, so I listen to him.
We never had an argument. We just kind of roll with it easily. Suppose Warren doesn't want to do something that I would have done. And suppose that happens 4 times over 40 years or something. What difference does it make to me? Net, the record is working out fine.
I don't need to be in Washington to figure out what the Washington Post newspaper is worth, and I don't need to be in New York to figure out what some other company is worth. It's an intellectual process. And the less static there is in that intellectual process, really the better off you are.
What is the intellectual process?
The intellectual process is defining your level, defining your area of competence in valuing businesses, and then within that area of competence, finding whatever sells at the cheapest price in relation to value. And there are all kinds of things I'm not competent to value, but there are a few that I am competent to value.
Have you ever bought a technology company?
No, I really haven't.
In 30 years of investing, not one?
I haven't understood any of them.
So you haven't ever owned, for example, IBM?
Never owned IBM. Marvelous company. I mean, a sensational company, but I haven't owned IBM.
And so here is this technological revolution going on, and you're not going to be a participant.
Gone right past me.
Is that all right with you?
It's okay with me. I don't have to make money in every game. I mean, I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do. There are all kinds of things I don't know about, and that may be too bad, but why should I know all about them? I haven't worked that hard on them. In the securities business, you literally every day have thousands of the major American corporations offered to you at a price that changes daily. And you don't have to make any decisions. You have to make, nothing is forced upon you. So there are no called strikes in the business. The pitcher just stands there and throws balls at you. And if you're playing real baseball and it's between the knees and the shoulders, you either swing or you get a strike called on you. If you get too many called on you, you're out. In the securities business, you sit there and they throw U.S. Steel at 25 and they throw General Motors at 68, and you don't have to swing at any of them. They may be wonderful pitches to swing at, but if you don't know enough, you don't have to swing. And you can sit there and watch thousands of pitches, and finally you get one right there where you want it, something that you understand, and then you swing. And
so you might not swing for 6 months.
You might not swing for 2 years.
As a general matter, as a one piece of specific financial advice, I would say, avoid credit cards. Just forget about them. We're in various businesses that issue credit cards. The American public loves credit cards. But if you start revolving debt on credit cards, you're going to be paying 18 or 20%. And you can't make progress in your financial life going around borrowing money at 18 or 20%. You can make a lot of money by lending it out at 18 or 20% over time. If you can find anybody that's good that will borrow from you. But you don't want to be on the side of the equation that's always behind in life. I was lucky. I'd saved about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. That $10,000 was really worth millions I might have earned later on, because after you get a family and everything, the expenses roll in. But those were my tools to work with, but it was only because I was ahead of the game. If you're behind the game by $10,000 at some point and paying 18 or 20% interest on it, you will never, you'll never get out of it. So the trick, I've got a partner that says, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. And that's true in financial matters as well. You want to figure out where you don't want to be, ahead of time and avoid that. And I get about a dozen letters a day from people who are having terrible problems. And there are two reasons why they have terrible problems. One is a number of them have had health problems of some sort. I mean, they have really been hit by some, or somebody in their family has been hit by some kind of catastrophic illness. And that is it's a terrible thing to happen to any family. And they run up bills they can't pay, and really only society can solve that one in terms of protecting people against that. That's just plain bad luck. But the other one is from people who run up credit card debt, and they're facing bankruptcy, or they've been through bankruptcy once before, and they owe a whole bunch of money, and they can't even pay the interest, let alone pay any principal. And half of my letters come from people like that, and that problem is avoidable. Catastrophic illness is not, but credit card debt is something you bring on yourself, and it's way better, it's way easier to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble financially. And I will guarantee you, if you run up big credit card debts, you will be in trouble probably the rest of your life in terms of your financial situation. On the other hand, if you get ahead of the game, even it's on a very modest scale, so that money is coming in from investing, and people owe you money, or equities owe you ownership, you'll be way ahead of the game compared to paying it, always paying your creditors every month. So my advice to you is, if you can't pay for it, don't buy it.
How would you advise people who aren't necessarily going into a career field in which you would make a large base salary, such as like medicine or something like that, maybe performing arts or music? How would you advise us to keep up financially with the rest of the world?
Well, it is true that a market system does not pay as well in some activities as might seem appropriate for the importance of those activities to society. Just take teaching, for example. I mean, teaching does not pay well. And what could be more important? I mean, you've got to be as interested in who the teachers of your children are as who your accountant is, or whatever, or who's winning the heavyweight title of the world, or that sort of thing. But it doesn't pay well, and it's a fundamental choice whether you're going to go into something. For many people, it'd be a fundamental choice whether you're going to go into something you love or something to try and make a lot of money. I think that generally it pays to go with what you love. I think that it's very hard to find people when they get to be my age who say that they've loved what they've done all their life and feel it was very worthwhile, but they're terribly sad they made that choice because they didn't make a lot of money. I don't think anybody's ever said that to me, that they wish they'd gone into something else where they were uncomfortable doing it, or didn't enjoy it, didn't feel very productive, but made a lot of money. So I don't think you'll find that. So I would go to work. I would go to work in whatever turns you on. It may turn out that it'll be more profitable than you can think, but almost everybody here will make enough money, unless they get some terrible habits along the way, to do reasonably well. And doing reasonably well in this country really is pretty darn good. I mean, it's not necessary to have huge amounts of money in order to enjoy yourself. I enjoyed myself when I had my $10,000, and I live in the same house that I lived in when I had about that. I bought it 41 years ago. I liked the house then. I like the house now. I mean, if you think about it, if you have a reasonable job, you'll be eating at McDonald's and I'll be eating at McDonald's. So we're at a push on food. I mean, in fact, I hope it's Dairy Queen, actually, and and if you come to Dairy Queen, you'll see me. And you can order anything on the menu I can order, and we both can afford it. You'll wear the same clothes I wear. I'll pay more for my suits, but as soon as I put them on, they look cheap on me. So we'll look about the same. And, we'll both live in the same kind of houses. I live in that house from 41 years ago, and it's warm in winter, and it's cool in summer, and it's comfortable. And you'll live in a house that's similar. And what difference does it make if you have 50 more rooms, or guest houses, or all that? It'll probably just bring you problems. I mean, you have to worry about the greenskeeper or something when you get through. So I have been in the houses of people where the houses are worth probably 200 times what my house is worth, and I would not be any happier in those houses at all. In fact, I'd be less happy. I just have one more thing to worry about, and dozens of people around the place, and people quitting, and people stealing from you, and all kinds of things. With it, we'll drive the same kind of car. In fact, you'll probably drive a better car. I drive a car that's about 8 years old. I don't know what it's worth now, but it gets me around fine. I mean, I'm perfectly happy. We'll watch the same television. We'll work on the same computer pretty much. The only difference will be how we travel long distances. I will fly in a plane that's more comfortable than flying Southwest Airlines or something, which I've got nothing against. But that's the one real big difference. And other than that, I do what I like every day. I hope you'll do what you like every day to do. And I work with nice people. I hope you work with nice people. And there's 24 hours in the day, and those are where the hours go. So great wealth is the tiniest bit different in a real sense than having just a decent income, and to trade a decent income and something you love doing and something where you feel worthwhile doing it for huge wealth where you trade off a lot of your principles would be a terrible mistake. I've made a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake, well, not the biggest, necessarily the biggest, but buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake, because Berkshire was a lousy textile business, and I bought it very cheap. I've been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, we'll say in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts, and you find this on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar. One puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. It's disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. But in those days, I was buying cheap stocks. And Berkshire was selling below its working capital per share. You got the plants for nothing, you got the machinery for nothing, you got the inventory and receivables at a discount. It was cheap. So I bought it. And 20 years later, I was still running a lousy business, and that money did not compound. You really want to be in a wonderful business, because the time is the friend of the wonderful business. You keep compounding, it keeps doing more business, and you keep making more money. Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking what I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started the insurance business, See's Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up rather than using Berkshire as the platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. I went into U.S. Air. I bought a preferred stock in 1989. As soon as my check cleared, the company went into the red and never got out. I mean, it was really dumb. I mean, I've got an 800 number I call now whenever I think about buying an airline stock. I call them up any hour that, fortunately, I can call them at 3 in the morning, and I just dial and I say, my name's Warren, I'm an aeroholic, and I'm thinking about buying this thing, and then they talk me down. I mean, it takes hours sometimes, but it's worth it, believe me. If you ever think about that buying an airline stock, call me and I'll give you the 800 number, because you don't want to do it. But we got lucky in terms of how we eventually came out on it, but it was a dumb decision. The question is about the personal qualities we look for in the executives we place at our various companies. The first thing is we don't usually place them. I mean, they come with them. We don't have anybody to place. So I have the problem occasionally, if somebody dies, or to replace a CEO. But most of our CEOs came with the deal. Clayton Homes, which we're buying, comes with Kevin Clayton running it. We will put no one in there He will run the place just as before. But in terms of the personal quality, when a seller comes to me with a business, whether it's Clayton or any of the others, Ike Friedman at Borsheim's, Mrs. B at Nebraska Furniture Mart, when they come to me, the first question I have to ask myself, because I'm counting on them to run the place, I have to decide, do they love the money or do they love the business? Now, there's nothing wrong with liking the money. I mean, they all like money, but they've got to love the business. They've got to have a passion for it. Because if I give them a whole bunch of money and they love the money and they don't love the business, no matter what they tell me, 6 months from now they'll be gone. You know, I mean, they'll just all of a sudden say, why am I getting up at 7 in the morning just so I can send a lot of money to Omaha? You know, I mean, it won't work. So they have to love the business. I mean, I want people with a passion for the business. I used to say that I had a one-line employment form, one-question employment form. The question was, are you a fanatic? You know, if you answered yes, you got the job. If you look around you at the people you admire, you know, they have certain qualities. I mean, you've got friends. Why do you like them? You know, generally, you know, generally they have an upbeat attitude on life. Generally, they are generous people. They're humorous people. They're people that do more than their share. They're people that are thinking about something nice they can do for you. And all of those qualities attract you. And none of those are innate at birth. I mean, you can acquire those. And then there's other people that turn you off, you know, and they have habits. They take credit for things they didn't do. They don't show up on time, whatever it may be. They're a little dishonest about things. And if you're looking at your life at a young age like you are, and you can choose what kind of a person you can be, why not be the person you admire rather than the person you can't stand? It's so simple. So just write down the qualities you like. Take your 5 best friends. Why do you like them? And just write down those qualities. And you will find there's no quality there that you can't have yourself. And similarly with the 5 people you can't stand to be around, put those things down that turn you off about those people. And if they turn you off about them, why should you possess them? It's so simple. You know, it's not like something complicated that you think you should be learning with an advanced degree in school.
It's not as complicated as investing in the stock market.
No, but it's enormously important to have people work with you in life. Right. They're going to work with you in life if they like you. You know, and they may occasionally, I mean, if you're in the Army or something, you know, you may work for somebody that you don't like. But by and large, you're going to get the best out of people if they feel good about you. And it's just so easy, but you've got to develop the habits early, because you can't say I'm going to suddenly become a terribly attractive person when I'm 60. It just doesn't work that way. So pick up the right habits now. And I will guarantee you, if you actually just write down those qualities and think about it, you will find you can have every one of the attractive qualities, get rid of the ones that are negative, and your life will be different.
If you want another amazing Warren Buffett espresso, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
How would you advise people who aren't necessarily going into a career field in which you would make a large base salary, such as like medicine or something like that,